This is Gary Atensi with CNTV, and today we're in New Jersey introducing Broken to Blessed, a story of trauma, struggle, and heartbreak that left this author stronger and more passionate than ever. I'm joined here with the psychologist and author, Louise. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start off a little bit about yourself. You were formally educated with a PhD in psychology from Capella University. You're
Yeah.
the founder and CEO of Refuge Health, where you offer holistic mental health care, and you're now a published author. Let's first go back to what life was like for you your first 18 years. Share with me a little bit about your childhood.
So it was very idyllic. And, so I grew up with a two-parent household, and, my dad was the breadwinner. And so it was very good up until I was 16. And my dad was in a tragic accident. And so we ended up losing him at 16. And so I moved to Jersey when I was 18 years old. And so, and just like maybe 8 months later, I was in a house fire. And so, and
Yep.
so the story begins there.
That's where your story begins right there. I mean, quite honestly, up until age 18, typical somewhat of a life used to what people are used to out there. Let's before we discuss your book, let's begin with a history of where your struggle and trauma in life began on one tragic night. Tell me about the night.
Yeah, so it was just a normal night for us. A Saturday night, we were just like getting ready because we are Christian in the family. So we were usually try to get to bed at a decent time to wake up in the morning. And so we got to bed in the middle of the night. That's when it happened. Our house caught on fire. And so we were struggling to get out. We tried everything. We tried to open the windows. They were jammed for some reason, maybe the heat from the fire, and we couldn't get out. And so it was just very horrific trying to, make it out alive, especially there were younger kids involved. I was 19, but the youngest of us was only a year and a half. So it was really tough, trying to manage to get out.
Yes, I can't imagine. Most people can't imagine a night like that. You had a near death experience and ensuing struggles after this fatal house fire. Did that teach you to appreciate really being alive and not take it for granted like many of us do probably every day?
Oh yes. I cherish life now more than I did, in my first 19 years of existence, because I was so close to death. The doctors, they didn't think that I was gonna make it. And so for me to be here, and not only just here, but able to, after the fire, I went back to college because I had just started college when the fire happened. And so a couple years later, I had my right mind to be able to go to college again. And so I don't take life for granted at all. And so every day is a blessing.
Interesting. I mean, I applaud you because many times I can't imagine how somebody can get out of bed and even move forward. While some of us have experienced life changing events, very few decide to write about them. When did you decide and make that decision to write an autobiography? You kind of remember the time and place.
Definitely. So I was in college, and one of my professors suggested that to me. And at first, it was very hard for me because I'm a very private person. The idea of having to share what I went through, because it was not pretty, some of the stuff that I went through. So I was reluctant at first, but she convinced me, and I started writing it. And I took a creative writing class. Also, my professor encouraged me to write, for the school's literary book newsletter. And but so I did it, but after a few years, I kind of struggled with the idea to actually put it out because I was still struggling with the
Yeah.
privacy of it, right? And so, but finally, I realized that um, the story, the message, outweighed what I wanted to keep for myself. And
That's,
so, being able to help others.
I mean, it's very brave of you. It's one thing just to write about that experience, but to actually share it with others, be vulnerable out there, that's impressive. So, after experiencing much heartbreak and trauma, why or maybe what was the turning point that made you decide to not only overcome your struggles, but to also help others and write about it as well as publish it and put it out there?
Well, I mean, I have to say, first of all, that, I am a woman of faith. So my belief in God gave me the strength to, pursue every goals that I had, and even the goals that I didn't even know I had, like writing a book. I was able to do that, and I leaned heavily on, my faith in God to do that. And I continued to do it because I know that I had a calling to make a difference, however small it may be or big. I felt that I sensed that I had a calling to be able to share that, whatever you go through in life, you can overcome it because
So that why was very apparent for you. You knew it was something you had to do. Your book is titled Broken to be Blessed. What was the most difficult broken experience you went through after that tragedy, and how did it ultimately lead you to feeling blessed?
So it was a lot of broken moments for me. But, as a teenager, to go through an experience like that, because, I mean, the whole world is based on physical appearance and all that. And for a teenager, it's like quadrupled, right? And so for me to have to deal with the repercussions of being in an accident and losing, the quote unquote beauty that I had prior to the fire, and dealing with the challenges, the physical challenges, those were broken moments for me that I had to reckon with.
Interesting. This book is a firsthand account, really, of survival, hardships, and divinely orchestrated redemption, really. The
Mhm.
pages will have the reader asking, is there any reason to believe? I mean, was that question something you asked yourself often?
Well, it's interesting. You think that I would be asking that a lot, but I didn't, because of my faith in God, I knew that there was a purpose, in spite of what happened, there was a purpose. And I saw the purposes, I saw the blessings that came after the fire. I was able to live, my life, just go after my goals. I was able to find love and all those stuff, so there was a reason for it.
They say that faith of that of a mustard seed is all we need, and you actually have proven that. You had that faith. That's a blessing within itself for you not to question anything, where I imagine many people would. This is a true story, really, of a once a healthy 19-year-old girl to overnight being physically disabled with severe burns on over 65% of her body. Do many find this book maybe even hard to read? What has been some of the feedback from people?
Well, I mean, the people closest to me, some of the people closest to me, they were a bit reluctant to read it. And some of my family, when they read it, they said they cried, like they sobbed, because they knew that I was in this, but they didn't know the details of like the nightmares that came with that. And so, but on the other hand of it, people who have read it, they were like, oh my goodness, like this really helped me, to be grateful, for what I have, and not like, to linger on, the things that I don't have. Right. And so that was the whole purpose of writing the book, to help people have a different perspective of life.
Yeah, definitely a perspective. There's no way somebody can read something like that and not realize that life is an incredible gift for us all. Without giving away too much, can you touch on the secret that you write about that allowed you to beat the odds and succeed in the face of all these adversities that you had?
So, I mean, like one of them I've mentioned already is like my faith. And I think I am naturally driven. I was always, very driven. I was what I, jokingly call a nerd. I loved studying. And so that gave me the drive to continue because it was not easy for me to go back to school the way I looked, you know. And so, but like the secret for me was that in believing that I was not by myself doing it, right? And so I knew that it wasn't going to be easy, but I had divine power on my side.
That is great. Your goal now is to help others deal with and recover from hardships. What is the single most important piece of advice you would give to someone who feels they are currently maybe at their breaking point?
Well, and that's the whole thing about my writing, Broken to be Blessed, is to let them understand that you may feel like you are at a breaking point, but it might be just a turning point, with the same way it was for me, right? Because like the moment that I was experiencing, if I were looking at it from a, natural perspective, it was a breaking point. But, I chose to see it as a turning point where I could use it as a stepping stone to reach my destiny. And they could do the same for themselves.
As you even included that in the title, I mean, it's a turning point, really. You believe in finding inner God given strength. Can you elaborate on what this means to you and how you guide others to discover this strength really within themselves?
So, one of the things that I often recommend to my clients as a psychologist is to, you know, learn to know about themselves because a lot of the times we don't know our potentials until we take the time to pause and get to know who we are. Because a lot of the times people think they've been living with themselves for X amount of years. That means they know themselves, but it needs more than that. We need to have a moment of pause and figure out what are our qualities, the things that makes us who we are, the core of who we are. And in understanding that, you are able to tap into potentials.
Interesting. I believe that. I mean, I teach my kids that it's important to pray, but it's just as important to sit and listen, take a moment and listen to what God is putting on your heart. I think that's important. What was the most challenging part of the writing process for you? Was it revisiting painful memories, structuring the narrative, or maybe something else entirely?
Actually, the hardest part for me was chapter 2, where I talked about the night of the fire. I dreaded it. I didn't know what was gonna come of me going back to that night because I made sure that the book was very detailed in everything, like every step of my journey, and so I dreaded that part because it was really a tragic and tough, night for us, especially because we lost 5 family members in the fire. And so that was my hardest one for sure.
Wow. I imagine most people would never want to even go back and revisit that. But to go back and revisit it, then write about it in detail, um, I know that's got to be a blessing for so many people out there to understand what you've gone through. What kind of impact are you hoping your book will have on readers? And what is the one key takeaway you want them to remember after they finished reading?
I want them to remember that, they can do whatever they set their minds to, because a lot of the times we get in our heads so much that we forget, the God given, abilities that we have. And so in them being able to see that, I overcame so much, it wasn't just the fire. There was like a lot of stuff after that. When they get to read the book, they will see there was a lot of like struggles post fire. And so the fact that I was able to do it, that they too can do it.
It's a great message. Louise, you believe that telling your story is possibly one of the main reasons you were allowed to live. Is it rewarding sharing your story now as an author and as a public speaker, as well as really a consultant for people?
Yes, I believe that for sure. And when I was in the hospital, when I started realizing the the effects of the impacts the fire has had, for some reason I felt like there was something greater in store.
Louise, thanks so much for sharing your story. Viewers, let's take a look at the bottom of the screen. And what you're going to see is her website where you can learn more about this author and her book. You can also read her blog that will further explore some insights about her personal journey. She also provides counseling via phone and Zoom to help those who can't afford traditional in-person services. You can find the book on Amazon. And also, we're showing on the bottom of the screen her site that has her contact information to book her as a speaker or a consultant. Once again, that is Broken to be Blessed, a turning point. This is Gary Atensa with CNTV. And if you don't know, now you know.